Okay. We're going to first, I'm gonna sit down. Good morning. My back is not in the best shape. Since I have a chair and I can, I'm gonna sit down. Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
We're going, our, regular teacher is in recess today. And,
Nathan and condemned David. Nathan condemned David. That's
okay.
verse 6.
So our lesson is Nathan condemns.
Oh, you just couldn't. Okay.
That's all right. I was ready to see, I was trying to read this up. I'm reading, nothing for our lesson is like it says, Nathan condemns David.
Yeah.
It's a combination, so that we need combination. Somebody that will stand up to us and tell us we were wrong. Instead of letting it go and hoping that hoping that you realize it yourself. Our devotional reading is on what?
Samuel, 2 Samuel 12, chapter 1, 9, 13 and 15.
2 Samuel 12, 1 through 9, and 13 through 15. Background scripture is
2 Samuel 12.
2 Samuel 12, 2, 2 Samuel 12 is our background scripture.
I got on. Good morning, God. Good.
Okay, so a key text is what?
Key text is Nathan said to David, "Thou art the man." At the bottom.
Okay, so to not just to introduce our lesson, we're going to go. I don't know, some reason I have my
Turn on this stuff.
what's going on? Anyway, our lesson today is our introduction. Our thought for today is justice and adversaries. We're still in the justice, law, and history part of our Sunday school lesson, and we're talking about David and Bathsheba.
Yeah.
And what comes about out when you're not following those against God's plan. Okay, let's read through our lesson starting with just now go read verse 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so you read 5, 6, 7, and 8. This is Dorothy 8, 9, 13, 15.
No.
And the Lord sent Nathan unto David, and he came unto him, and he said unto him, there were 2 men in one city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had exceedingly many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing, save 1 lamb, which he had brought and acknowledged, nourished up, and found together with him and with his children. It did eat of his own meat and drank of his own cup and lay in its own bosom, and unto him as a daughter. And there came a traveler unto the rich man, and he spared to take of his own flock and his own herd, to dress for the wayfaring man that was come unto him, but took the poor man's lamb and dressed it for the man, and it
That was to,
dressed it for the man that was come to him.
right. And David's anger was greater, kindled against the man. And he said to Nathan, and the Lord liveth, the man that has done this thing surely shall surely die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. And Nathan said to David, thou art the man. Thus said the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I believed that out of the land of Saul. And I gave thee thy master's house, and thy master's wife unto thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would moreover given unto thee such and such thing.
Therefore hast thou been Christ the commandment of the Lord,
Amendment.
to do evil in his sight. Thou hast killed. I don't know that name, that word. What's that word? You say, kill it, I don't know that. It's called U-R-I-A-H.
Uriah,
Urias.
Uriah the Hittite. The Hittite. Did I say it right? I think it's
Hittites.
Hittite with the sword, and has taken his wife to be thy wife, and has slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. And they said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And they said unto David, the Lord also has put away thy sin, thou shalt not die. Howbeit, because by this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemy of the Lord, to the blasphemy. The child also that is born unto thee shall surely die. And Nathan departed to his home, and the Lord struck the child that human wife bare unto David, and it was very sick.
Amen. You notice throughout these verses, as Nathan is talking to David, he always refers to Bathsheba as Uriah's wife. He never calls her by name.
Right.
And there's a reason why he never did. And I'm going to talk about that briefly in a minute. But he went through this whole time in this whole chapter as he was coming to David. He never mentioned her name. He always referred to Uriah's wife. And one of the reasons is because she did not belong to David.
Right.
She belonged to Uriah. So he's referring to something that belonged to someone else. And this chapter has a lot to do with more than just David taking and what he did. It refers a lot to what we do in our everyday lives also, and how we take advantage of people because we feel like we can't. And If that, and what he's telling us, that's not right, in our stuff. Let's take a moment for Father. We thank you for this day that we come together. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to sit and discuss your word today, Father. Open our hearts and our minds and our eyes to see what it is that you are trying to tell us today. Father, let us focus on your word, and let your word be a blessing to our hearts, mind, and our spirit. Bless us this day, Father. Please open your word and guide us, and Lord, give us an understanding of what it is that you would have us to understand. Be with us and guide us from this day forward in Jesus' mighty name. We thank you, Lord. We thank you. Amen. Okay, so Nathan starts out when he comes to David, and he's coming to David, and he's presenting to him a case that he's using to tell two different men, or in reference to who he's talking about. And he's talking about David. He's talking about, I need to do something. There we go. And we're okay, so David, we all know the story of what David did. He saw something that he wanted, and he just went out and did what he thought he was big enough to do.
She enticed him.
Huh?
She enticed it.
Well-
The battlefield never moved. She knew what she was doing.
Well, still it says she did, she had a little, I'm not saying that she was totally innocent.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that David went out with David is the king.
Yes.
And David went out and did something he thought he was big enough to do.
Right.
And he did what he thought he wanted to do.
Right. But it wasn't.
So the point is here that David did what he thought he was big enough to do. And then he tried to get away with it.
Right. He
And,
thought he was gonna get away with it. But
well, he tried to.
yes.
And it didn't work out. You see here, he said, and the Lord said Nathan unto David. And the understanding that Nathan was a prophet, and the prophets of those days, the leaders, the prophets of those days, which were held a position of authority that the leaders of that day would listen, had to, and they would listen to God's people in Israel. And with the understanding that God was still in charge. Now, David was a man after God's own heart, is the way they put it. But Nathan came to him knowing what had really happened. And God had already shown him what had really happened. So he went there with the saying, first of all, he told him, and the Lord said to Nathan, go unto David. And he said, and he came unto him and said unto him, there were two men in one city, the one rich and the other poor.
Yeah.
And he is giving David a situation. A lot of times we have a tendency of trying to straighten somebody out by coming directly at them and confronting them on what they have done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know that they done something, so we come right and confront them point blank without giving them a chance to explain it or giving them a chance or come at them a certain way to give them to think about it, give people a chance to think about it. We come out and say, well, I saw you with so and so, and you did this shit, and you did that.
Yeah.
You know, we're not doing, a lot of us don't even know all the circumstances. A lot of us don't even know what actually happened.
Right.
So Nathan is giving David a different scenario, a way of showing us the way we should approach the situation. How do you support, confront someone with something? And if they done wrong, you know, we are not to go blowing our way and you can't straighten people out like that.
I just go off.
Just go off. So Nathan comes to him, he gives him a story, something that he can relate to. This is something that David would confront every day as he.
Pull your head up.
And he would
got some sense.
come at it that way he was coming at it, that's something that he can relate to. And these are things that we should be doing also. The way we should come after people. Give them, you know, we should talk to them in a way that they can relate to what we're talking about. Instead of trying to come at them and pull them down. A lot of opportunities, when we find out about somebody, there's an opportunity to bring them down. Mm-hmm. Especially if we think they're higher than we are. We look for our ways to bring people down instead of telling them they're wrong. Bible says, if you see your brother go apart, pull it aside.
Yeah.
But we have a tendency to see our brother go straight, and we don't want to snatch him down. And if we can see him going straight, we want to see how we can go back to the church and say, well, I saw brother so and so doing such and such. As an example, I had a friend of mine some years back, went to a club downtown. And I was a young minister just starting out. I was just moving up at the church of the Golden Cross. And I was just moving up. And I was being an assistant to the pastor. And a friend of mine went out one night. The guy I worked with and had known for years. Stopped at the club. It was at, I want to say we was in, but I don't think that this fellowship. And he got drunk. He got drunk too much and he couldn't drive. So he called me. And I begged me, but I please come pick him up. Because he said, I can't drive, man. I need, can you just come pick me up? I said, okay. I got up, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. So I got up to the friend, so I went down to get it. Well, it wasn't quite closed in time, so I didn't see him outside, so I went in to find him. I went in, I found him, came back out, was in the club, I guess, about 10 minutes. Came back out, got in the car, drove home. Sunday morning, I get to church, and nothing happened in Sunday school, but during the morning service, people getting up to testify. This sister gets up, testifying and saying that, telling me how wrong I was for being at the club that night. And going off about me being in the club and me sitting in the pulpit and I'm out the club and the night they come back sitting in the pulpit. Not knowing the situation, it's just coming down. So God That's just what a good pastor. Ella Williams, Reverend Williams stopped her in the middle of her rant.
That wasn't for her to say.
And he set her down. And after the testimony took care of the she was elaborating on what happened. And I just told her, I the friend. And just so happened, the friend I picked up was one of the members of the church. He had just joined the church. And he got up and said, yes, he can't do it.
How she know that she was there to see me?
Right.
See, that was the other point that we made brought out. That's the point we brought out later. That Reverend Williams brought out. After I had explained it, we explained, but the thing about it, we shouldn't have, is the way she came out with it.
Yeah.
And the first thing that somebody, one of the mothers got up and said, well, I'd like to know what was you doing out at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
When you live on the other side of town.
What was you doing?
What was you doing over near his lordship at 2 in the morning?
You had to be on there too.
If you want to jump on him. So the point is the way you approach people with facts. And my point is that the way Nathan came at David was a different way. Nathan knew the facts.
Yeah.
He knew what was going on. He knew what had happened. So Nathan came in another way without complication. He said, start telling certain that was a man. He came to him and said unto him, there was 2 men in the city. The one was rich and the one was poor. So that breaks it down that there was one that had and doesn't have not. You'll give them direction. Nathan could have chosen a more direct approach, like I said, and confronted it. But he didn't want to come out and do that. He used something that was totally different. And he said, God says the Old Testament prophets often use metaphors and symbolism to speak against evil to their nations. We don't use other examples of that, but they use symbolism. The description of the 2 men in the city primed David for the story. And what it did, it gave David a narrative that he can see. Like I said, this is something he deals with every day as king.
He was trying to trap him in his own thing, right?
No.
No, he was trying to trap the king.
No, he wasn't trying to trap him. What he was, in order to get him to relate to what he was talking about, he used something that he does every day. David as king judged people and resolved conflict in the kingdom every day. So what he's doing is giving him a narrative of something that he would have had to judge in the course of a day. In the course of the day, he would have to judge 2 people coming to him with a problem or a disagreement. So what Nathan is doing is giving him something, a narrative or something that he can relate to. Something that's not out of the ordinary that he wouldn't have to that he would do anyway. So he's giving him a narrative, something that he knows. Then he goes on and says that the rich man had exceeding many flocks and herds, and the poor man had nothing. So he giving him an idea that this is a man that has everything. In this disagreement, there's 2 people. One of them has everything, and the other one has nothing. And the way he's relating that to farming, because since farm animals were at that time was a symbol of wealth. In other words, the more cows you had, the more donkeys you had, the more camels you had, and it was a sign of wealth. Because it showed that how much you was worth. And like we look at people, how much money they have to pay, or how many houses they own, how many buildings they own, or how many companies they are ahead of, we looked at that as well. But then at that time, we looked at farm animals as well, and how big your crops were, and that proved how wealthy you were. So he's making this point. He's making this point to show that this one man was extremely wealthy, and the other man had nothing, or the clothes on his back. But he said, save one little lamb. Now he had one. He wasn't totally. He had one little lamb.
Yeah.
One little ewe.
Which he had brought and nourished up, and they grew up together with him. So it's making a point. He has something that was very precious to him, very important, very important. He said he nourished it, he grew up with him, and with his children, did eat of his own meat. In other words, he eat this lamb that he had ate from his table.
Right.
Okay, so that's how close he was.
Finish.
And with his children, and he drank of his own cup. In other words, he had his own place where he drank from. And he lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter.
Yeah.
With the examples of here, Nathan is piling on more all the details that were about the closeness of this lamb to the family, and the dearness of the one little ear lamb to the poor man, how close he was to how important he was. And David had to protect his father's sheep. His job was to protect the poor. And he was putting it out there in a way that David could relate to, because David his job was to protect. And to protect the poor. So he's really piling it on, he's really building it up. He's trying to build up to David. Now, you see David sitting on his throne, listening to this story, and probably getting teared up. See how close this man was to how close he was. And these are things that we need to look at in our lives. How close are we? How close are we to the things that we have? How important they are? And we put emphasis on items on how important it is. A lot of us put more emphasis on our children than we do on anything else. And we have to look at it, but Nathan is really piling it on. And you listen all how close he was. And since he took, and how he what the lamb meant to him. And the list of blessings does not stop there. God gave David the promise of his own ongoing destiny. I'm getting ahead of myself. You're too far ahead of myself. I got to back up. I like to turn the page. So, in other words, he told David, Nathan told the story, he continued here, going on with it, and he continued to build it up. And Nathan's story will also contain hints in it. So when he said in verse 3, say one little ear lamb which he had brought up and nourished it, and he held it close to his bosom. And Nathan, in that story, that verse he was giving him showing the importance of this lamb to the poor man. That the sheep laid with the man, and he recalled that David laid, and it was recalled that David laid with Bathsheba. That the sheep said was unto him as a daughter unto him. at Bathsheba, whose name meant something like daughter. The name Bathsheba means daughter. So it was a hint to David that he's talking about Bathsheba. So he's hinted to him, but he hasn't yet come out and said it. And in verse 4 it said, and there was a traveler. Now, this is where it started to hit home. When he said there was a traveler unto the rich man. And he spent to take of him his own flock. When in those days, if you were traveling, they would take you in and they would share with you what you have. You know, when I was reading this last night, I thought about what we used to do with back home. Back in the town where if somebody came into town, you can go to any house in town and they would feed you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you down the place, they would put you up.
Mm-hmm. Find your spot right down the floor somewhere, wherever you want.
They would find your spot.
That's what Mama said.
That was something I used to think about when we used to do it, and people would never think twice about it. We won't do that anymore. We lost that.
Can't trust people like that
And
anymore.
that day, that's what they did. When we talk about a traveler, so he's still talking about something that they can relate to. When we talk about a traveler, and that traveler came into the rich man, and he spent to take of his own flock and of his own herd to dress for a farewell of wayfarer man that was coming unto him, but took the poor man's land. In other words, he's going to feed this man, this traveler, but he's not going to feed him for his flock. He's going to feed him to somebody else. In other words, he'll take advantage of the poor man because he can. And this is the way we do today. We look to take advantage of people because of what they have. And it bothers me a lot when I look at people that's well educated.
Mm-hmm.
How they try to take advantage of people that don't have the education that they have. How how some salesmen would try to take advantage of people because they don't have the knowledge that they have, or they try to sell something that people are going to look at. They don't look at the same way. So the idea that he is using and what Nathan is saying, he's using his position to take advantage of someone that he has under him because he can. And he has earlier told how important this lamb was to this. So he's trying to give, and he took the lamb and dressed it for the man that was come to him. In other words, he done took the man's lamb, he done took the man's sheep, killed it, fixed it up real good, made some red beans and rice,
Feed it to him.
and put made a good salad, and put it on the side and carved it, and gave him the best leg of lamb that he had.
It's on.
But somebody else's, not his own. So in the day before, so like I said, the day before they didn't have hotels and restaurants and all that other stuff going, so people would take them in and they were feeding. The rich man followed the conversation by preparing the meal for members they didn't normally would do, but he prepared the meal from somebody else's field.
Can I ask you what I'm confused about now? This man, we talking about the cook and everything. That was not his lamb he cooked.
No, he took the other man's land.
He cooked somebody else's stuff. That's how I was.
He's talking about the rich man before me. He said the rich man took from the poor man
Okay.
something that was close to him, Not only that he didn't really have anything, but he took something that was really close to and important to him. He said, when he tried to tell us, he went one step above.
He said,
He was one step above of taking advantage.
And he gave it to you.
I told her I took her chicken and fed it to
He
them.
gave it to you.
he gave it to me.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is he went one step above being taken advantage of.
Okay.
You know, he didn't only take advantage of it, he took there's something that was important, something that was close to him, and he took and he used that.
Okay, I just want
So he's making that point that he just abused his power.
Okay.
And because he did it because he could.
Okay.
He just took something that was close to him, something from somebody that was close to him. That he took the closest thing that the man had to a child.
Okay.
It was like
So the rich man,
It was like his pet, right?
huh?
It was more like a pet than,
Yeah, it was almost like family.
Mhm.
This sheep was
Real
more
special
than,
to
he
him.
was trying to say, tell David, this sheep was more than just a sheep. It was family to him, because he ate from his table, he drank from his cup, he slept in it, you know. So we're trying to tell him it's important. And here this man is saying to feed somebody else, not for himself, but to feed somebody else, and would take from the flock that he had, because he expressed that he had more than enough. But he would take his own, because he had enough to be able to take his own without bothering this man. And it was trying to show him a proof of point to David. And he went on, he made it look really so personal that in fact David angered and was greatly kindled against that demand. Now David's really upset, he's mad, and he's really upset now against him. This person that did this, and this person that did that. And as the Lord lived, the man that had done this thing should surely die. He is passing judgment that he thinks is on someone else. So David is really upset now
Okay.
about what Nathan is telling him. The difference in solution and resolve between the two men combined with the rich man, heartless action is what he was looking at. He said the man was heartless in what he did. Didn't take into consideration nothing else but his own greed. And so his action made the guilt of the rich man really apparent. It made it totally clear that the man was guilty of what he had done. So David's initial instinct, you know, excuse me. So David's initial instinct is to pass judgment on this man.
That's right.
So he's ready to pass judgment because he wants to sentence this man for what he had done and his behavior. Would be appropriate. He would look at the appropriate sentencing. And the man for his disregard, his behavior and the things that he had done, which were ironically would be approached for both adulterers and murder. So he passed judgment when he said he was put to death. It is a judgment and a sentence they were put to for murderers and adulterers. So verse 6 said, he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pit. In other words, he's telling that he's going to, this man should give back to the poor man 4 times as much. 4 times as much as he should from him. because because of what he did. So the Hebrew connection here translate and is often translated that it is the sincere, the realization that death was not the predicted punishment. It wasn't a proper punishment for this act, even though David was upset. And it was just like he had stolen the lamb. So since he had stolen, he had to give back 4 times or 5 times more. So 4-fold of what he had taken. In other words, you're going to give back more than you have taken from him. Is what he's telling. David did not realize that he had stepped on a landmine.
Mm-hmm.
He had stepped on a landmine and just blew himself up.
Yeah.
But he natural reaction, like I said, it's a natural reaction that David gave. The natural instinct was for him. He was looking at it from the eyes of someone sitting on the judgment seat, judging someone else. When actually he was judging himself. And see, this is the way, if we approach, this is the way we should approach things. When we deal with people and deal with our own. We should approach them in a way, in a sense, that they can see what you're talking about without you passing judgment on. See, this way, the way Nathan is putting it, David can see it. So when he gets to the point, they said set stuff on the land now. And when he's getting to a point now where before Nathan gives him tells him what he's talking about, he's understanding. So he said, the guilty one. And Nathan said to David, thou art the man. So now, even through, Nathan has gotten David to the point where he said, yeah, he should give back. He's wrong, and he shouldn't have did that. And he said, I guess he was telling him that we need to get that man here. So he told David, can you the man? Now you can imagine the look on David's face. We told him that you're the man. See, the clue surrounding the text indicate that this is the conversation between Nathan and David took place moments after the offense occurred on the occurrence of the child's birth. They had time to rationalize his sin away from the burial of in his mind. In other words, this text, he is telling him ahead. Like David already went through the routine. He has already taken and he has already sent Uriah to his death. He's already taken Bathsheba in, and she's already pregnant. And she's ready to give birth. So this is the point where you bring it up to him, and David has already admitted when he said that he should put what should happen to this man. He's already convicted himself.
This is David's baby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. He said I had already taken to the point where David has to, and he had already passed judgment on himself without knowing. And then when Nathan told you the man, what is he going to say? He would say, I guess I would imagine he had a little confused look on his face from that one statement. He said, Nathan said, David, thou art the man. So I would imagine that he would, without really knowing him, just from that statement, he would be slightly confused. I know I would be if we were talking about somebody else and you don't say it is me. And I know I didn't take somebody, and I'm thinking I didn't take nobody's land and kill it and give it to somebody else. So you can see there should be a little confusion with David sitting up saying, what are you talking about? And imagining, not knowing really all the things that he's talking about. So he had to get back to him. So in verse 7b, he tells us, thou said the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel. Now he had to explain to him what he was talking about.
Okay.
Because you can imagine he had to have some confusion there. And he said that, okay, I passed judgment myself for what? And a lot of times we do things, when somebody brings it to our attention, we don't want to admit it. We just won't recognize it when they first approach it. We want to think that they're talking about somebody else. They're not talking to me. It could be me, I didn't do that.
You know, think about it, oh, that wasn't me.
You know if you did
Think about it, oh, that wasn't me.
So I would imagine his thinking was, he can't be talking about me, he has to be talking about somebody else. What are you talking about? So now Nathan has to break it down. See, we have to put this thing apart. You have to put this car apart, stop and put it apart, and put it apart now. So let me bag it up, bag it up so you can understand. So I have to bag up and go backwards in order to come forward. So he was talking about the charged judgment that he had. In verse 17, thou said the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. He's telling him that we have to recognize God made you king over Israel. He brought you out of what you thought you was in. When you was under Saul, when Saul was chasing around the country trying to kill you. Nathan reminded David of his favor in the Lord's eyes. And he showed him how that he showed him favor. And was very clearly he must have remembered the days. He was summoned forth and out of the past and was anointed king.
He's a king.
So, and then he said, and I gave thee thy master's house. In other words, he's telling you got, not only once you was anointed, you got everything. I gave you his house, what it said. I gave you the master's house. And I gave you his wife. In other words, everything that Saul had, I gave you. You got it. You got his house, you got his wives, you got his money, you got everything that he has. And he said, and of Judah, and if they that had been to the little, if that wasn't enough, what we were saying, I would moreover have given unto you, godly, such and such things. In other words, if that wasn't enough, God thought so much of you that he not only gave that, if that wasn't enough, he would have gave him out. And he's showing him the realization that sometimes God blesses us, and we don't recognize the blessing that God has given us. It's something about something that somebody else has that we feel like we have to have. Without looking at the idea that God has already blessed us with all the things that we have. We have things now that we don't even use.
You know something, Pastor? All things ain't good. You know, all money ain't good money either.
Oh no, all money is not good money, but
Be happy what you got.
yeah, we have to recognize the blessings that we have.
Yeah.
And when he's telling David the same thing that we got to look at also. God bless you with all these things.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go get somebody else, or you have to ask God, he can more.
Just don't be greedy.
When he give you that, he can give you something else.
Mhm.
You know, it's like people, for some reason, if I have something that you want, some people feel like, I can't just, I'm gonna go get what you got. I'm gonna take what you got.
No.
I'm gonna will take what you got. This is the way people think. Without realizing, and what he's trying to tell David is the same thing he's telling us. God bless you with all these things. And if that wasn't enough, all you have to do is ask and he will give you more. And this will tell us that if what you have now, you don't feel like it's enough, ask God. Just like he bless you with this, he will bless you with that. But you're not trying to take somebody else out. You know, to what you had. So this is what he's telling David, and that applies to us today. He's telling David, I would moreover have given unto thee such and such things, if it wasn't enough. Let him know that you didn't have to go out and take from somebody else. You, in other words, tell him, you took from somebody else when you didn't have to. If you wanted another wife, God would bless you with another. Even though you think that you didn't have enough. Because when David took Saul's house and took Saul's wife, David already had a wife. He had already married Saul's daughter.
He just greedy, selfish.
It wasn't like he didn't have a wife.
Oh, I didn't read that part.
Huh?
I didn't read that part that he had a wife.
Yeah, he had a wife.
He had a wife. He was already married. He married Saul's daughter. Saul promised him his daughter. And when he fought Goliath, he said, you defeat Goliath, I will give you what you want. And he asked for Saul for his daughter. And he gave him his daughter's hand. So it wasn't like he didn't have wives. He had more wives than he could handle.
Greedy, yeah, he's greedy.
So he's letting us know that when he's telling you, you're ungrateful.
Yes, you are.
You're very ungrateful for what you have, what God has blessed you with. And now he tells him, therefore hast thou departed the commandments of the Lord to do evil in his sight. You are taking and you're doing evil in his sight. He had told you not to. Do no evil. And it said in his sight is letting us know that you cannot do evil that's not in God's sight.
You see everything.
So, but he's letting them know that what you thought you were doing in darkness, I saw. He saw. So disobeying the Lord in the fact that the face of such egregious evidence and of favor was wicked. You know, you want to go ahead and do this in God's sight, and it's evil and wicked doing it when you don't have to. When you're disobedient. Being disobedient when you don't have to be disobedient. You've taken something that you didn't have to take.
You really don't need it.
And taking something that you really didn't need. So David had set his own punishment. The foundational commandment against covetousness, adultery, and murder. He had broken all three of those commandments. Covenant, he covered something that didn't belong to him. Adultery, he took someone else's wife. Murder, he had Uriah killed. So he had committed 3 sins that should have condemned him to death. So Nathan brings it to his attention and reminds him, let him know that what you thought you did, you was God saw it. And I know it. God told him, he said, thou hast killed Uriah, the Hittite, with the sword, and thou hast taken his wife. So tell them first, you committed murder. And then you have taken his wife as thy wife. In other words, you have coveted and committed adultery. You have coveted somebody else. You have coveted something that Uriah had. And has slain him with the sword for the children of Ammon. He had taken his wife, he has covered his wife, he had killed him, and he has committed adultery. For the first time, Nathan named Uriah as the Hittite. He called Bathsheba only Uriah's wife. You know, we're still talking about, he haven't called her by name. Because, one, it wasn't important. The important thing that in order to get his point across was not called, Bathsheba. It was because of what Uriah did. Uriah covered, David covered Uriah's wife. He didn't say it by name. He committed adultery with Uriah's wife. If you said he committed adultery with Bathsheba, it wouldn't make sense, would it? You commit adultery when you do it against somebody else. So he named the person that the sin was committed against. The sin was committed against Uriah, not against Bathsheba. It was committed with Bathsheba, not on her. The sin was hers on her. The sin was on David that he had committed against Uriah, not Bathsheba.
But they was friends.
Huh?
They was like friends, right?
Yeah, it was his friend, but that didn't have a point nothing to do with it.
I know one point said, I knew he was supposed to, but they was friends, that's why he had a doubt. I don't mess with my friend's girlfriend. But he thought about it, I did wrong. I should have never messed with my best friend's girl.
Yeah, that's one way you can look at it, but the point is, regardless of the friend or not, you're not supposed to do it.
I know that's what I'm saying.
You know, where the point is that Uriah was under him. Uriah was not his equal. He had more than her. Uriah only had one wife and lived in a little house off the palace. Ate what he earned from being a soldier. David didn't have to want anything. So the point I'm saying, the rich man, the poor man, he was trying to get them to relate to the idea that David had more than Uriah had. So he had, and Uriah couldn't get no more because Uriah only had one wife. He couldn't afford to have more than one wife. Even though the law said he could have more than one. He probably couldn't afford it as a soldier. He probably couldn't afford to have more than one. Because that time, that man had to take care. If he had two wives, he had to take care of both wives.
And the children they had.
And the children they had. So Uriah probably didn't have to. He was saying with David as a rich man and a poor man because Uriah could afford to have no more than what he had. That one wife. So it doesn't matter what he did. So the sin was committed against Uriah, not Bathsheba. Because what David took was something that this man could not afford to have, no more than what he had. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, he took them out.
So the sin was committed against you. So he did not use the name. He said Uriah's wife because that was the sin that was committed. The rich man took away the poor something that belonged to the poor man, his wife. So it was then, regardless of what her name is, that she was married. It didn't matter her name. It was Uriah's wife. So this is the point that he's trying to get across. And the point he's trying to get across to us is the idea that we shouldn't, because we have something, that don't mean we need to go take it from somebody else. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter the name of it. It's the idea that you took something that didn't belong to you. because you felt like you could. You get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Okay, so this is the reason when you look at the idea that he always related to Bathsheba as Uriah's wife. And because that's what the sin was. And he said, and had slain him with the sword of the children of Amorites. In other words, the children of Amorites, they was fighting against the Amorites. And the children of Amorites was the sons of the parents of the Amorites that they were warring against. So he took the sword, he said the sword's up here. He didn't know which one of them killed him. All he knows is that David put him out there to the point where he could be killed. With no protection. So the point is that it's not that you don't need to put a name to anything. If you took something that belongs to you, you don't need to know what it died that you took it. And if you didn't need it, you got it because somebody else had it and you won it. So it doesn't matter what name you put to it. You put any name to it. You took it because it was there, you could, and you did. And you didn't have to.
Right.
Because a lot of times people go steal stuff that they can go buy.
Yeah.
I know people went to jail for something that they could have won. They had more than enough money to buy.
Mhm.
They took it because it was there and they wanted to. Then they get caught going to jail. And the court first said to the judge that, why did you just go ahead and buy it? I see here by your arrest you have enough money to buy it. Why didn't you just go ahead and buy it? So this is the thing we have to look at. Brother, open mind. So you get to know. So he goes on to tell him and to let him know that he sticks his foot in. And verse 13, and David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Now, I guess a lot of people ask that same question, why didn't God punish David for what he did? Now, David committed 3 sins that should have caused him, should have been punishment in death. A lot of people ask, why did God let him get away with it? One of the reasons is this, that David did something a lot of us won't do. He said, after Nathan had pointed out to him what he had done, he said, I have sinned against God, against the Lord. He spoke the truth as king. And he admitted that he was wrong. A lot of us have God punishment or punishes us, allows punishment to come upon us, because when somebody approaches us with something that we did, we say, I didn't do that.
Quickly.
You saw the excuses. Even though we know we're guilty, we did. We start looking for excuses of the reason why what we shouldn't do. I didn't do that. But David, first thing he said once he admitted, I have sinned. He spoke the truth. Came right out. He said David was anointed king because he was a man of God, after God's own heart. His confession here is surely one that indicated why God considered him a man after his own heart. Is the reason he admitted that he done wrong. He admitted that he had sinned. He didn't come out with an excuse. He said, I'm king, I can do what I want to do. That's what Saul did.
Yeah.
But David came right out and admitted. And in 13b, he says, and Nathan said unto David, the Lord also has put away thy sin. Thou shalt not die. God accepted his confession. In other words, he came right out, didn't make a mistake, came right out and admitted that he did wrong. So God forgave him. David deserved to die for his crime, but the Lord once again showed himself to be compassionate, forgiving of transgression and sin. So even so, David would experience both punishment and he would experience the punishment for it. Even though God gave him, he still didn't let him get totally away. God did punish him for it. He said in 14, hereby because of this deed thou shalt given great a curse to the enemies of the Lord, to blaspheme. In other words, people are going to blaspheme the Lord because of what you did. They're going to say, well, God tell you not to do this, and I'm going to say that, and then you go ahead and do it. What kind of God is that? People say, why did God let people? God let the people, kids, or children die in that thing. That's my greatness. You know, they find reasons to go against God. And we have done it 2 occasions.
Mm-hmm.
So what he's telling them, how big? Because of because of what you did, your deeds, that will give the assurance to your enemies. In other words, he's giving your enemies something to come against the Lord about. And the things we do outside, and it goes to us. We should have to sing and dance and praise God and go out and do some stupid stuff out on the street. People look at it and say, you call yourself a Christian. Yeah. You go out there and start cursing somebody else. You call yourself a child. People look for reasons to come against God, and then look for that reason in you. Because of what you claim, what you are. And what he said, how big? Don't do it. Because if you do it, this is what's going to happen. You give your enemies a reason. I walked out of a club that I was doing a good deed. I thought for picking somebody up. But it gave somebody else the opportunity to have something to say against God.
And you.
Well, they just said you call yourself a man of God. And you are doing this. So it goes both ways when we do things. Even though and people are good at that. And we're going to finish up with 15. He said, and they told him, depart unto his house. And the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore unto David. And it was very sick. And the child went to die. So what happened is he didn't go without punishment. God allowed the child to be born. Once the child was born, he has grown an attachment as it came on the child. He has grown an attachment to the child. And he loved the child. So God allowed the child to be born just to take the child away as a punishment. Amen. So he didn't go without being punished. If God would have had the child die at birth before actually born, it would have been no effect. It would just been a child that died in birth. But he allowed the child to be born. And that's where the punishment came from. That was his punishment. So don't think God allows you to get away with stuff because he did it. Because you do it. Some of them think that, well, I got away with it. You don't get it. I got away with it. And don't think David just totally got away with it. David didn't totally get away with it. He was punished. He didn't totally get away with it. So we're going to break off because we're running over. I don't like this time frame. We have to talk to Bishop Buell about this time frame. Okay. We're going to close out a Sunday school with a prayer. Father, in Jesus' name, we thank you, Lord, for the school, Sunday school that we pour. They are for your words, for blessing and keep us as we go forth to our service. Bless the service today as we go forth this day forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Bless the offer that's been given, Lord. Let the talk and use the rope. Let the rope in your name. Bless and keep us now forever. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I'm gonna get you in for right.
Hey, God bless you. I see my little ones.
My mama had all of us in church too. Oh, my grandkids.
Good morning.
Why you do that?
Grow up, my grandkids and kids grow up.
Why you do that?
I said, all my grandkids and stuff grown up in church.
Word in
Little
there.
kids, yes.
We gotta get them back.
Yeah, they grown, they live all,
Oh, okay.